The Mississippi-Rideau Source Protection Region is comprised of the Mississippi Valley and the Rideau Valley watersheds. Almost 90% of this area is mapped as highly vulnerable. Each dot shown here represents a groundwater well used for either domestic water supply, such as drinking, washing and cooking, or for agricultural practices like irrigation or for livestock. So what makes an aquifer vulnerable? The hydrogeological conditions of a region strongly influence the vulnerability of an aquifer to contamination. Soils that are coarser with larger spaces between grains, like sands and gravels, are more permeable, meaning water can flow through them relatively easily. Since water can move faster in these soils, so can contaminants. This leaves less time for contaminants to naturally break down or be reduced in concentration before reaching the water table. This is especially the case for fractured rock, where contaminants can be rapidly transported along single large fractures or in interconnected fracture networks. In contrast, flow and transport are much slower in compact and fine-grained soils like silts and clays. The further a contaminant travels before reaching the water table or well, the more time there is for the contaminant to naturally break down. So shallow water tables are more vulnerable than deep water tables. The type of aquifer will also play a role in its vulnerability. An aquifer can either be confined, meaning there's an overlying protective layer, or unconfined, with no protective layer. The overlying protective layer is often made of silts, clays, some types of glacial till, or in rare cases unfractured rock, and provides an important barrier against contaminants. Since a confined aquifer is less connected to changes on the surface, it may also better withstand the impacts of severe weather events. In short, unconfined aquifers are more vulnerable than confined ones. However, thicker soils overlying unconfined aquifers can help slow and break down contaminants before they reach the water table. Many of the aquifers in the Mississippi-Rideau Source Protection Region are unconfined bedrock aquifers with shallow water tables. In short, extremely vulnerable. There are also known or potential areas of karst bedrock, which means fractures in the limestone have been enlarged by the rock dissolving away, posing an even greater risk for contamination. Also, there is very little overlying protective soil throughout most of the region. All areas without thick soil have been classified as highly vulnerable. Private groundwater sources from wells supply drinking water to approximately 1.6 million Ontario residents, who rely on about 700,000 private wells across the province. In Eastern Ontario, individuals using private wells as their primary drinking water source face higher risks of acute gastrointestinal illness, or AGI, compared to those on municipal water. Sources of contamination include improper manure application or disposal, septic system effluent, and wastewater runoff intensified by extreme weather events. These all represent a potential source of waterborne pathogens. Groundwater and surface water are frequently contaminated by environmental sources of E. coli and total coliform, globally recognized indicators of fecal contamination. E. coli is found in the gastrointestinal tracts of animals, which means it's also in their feces. Not surprisingly, detection of E. coli in water suggests fecal contamination and the potential presence of other pathogens, such as Giardia, that can cause gastrointestinal infection. Ontario provides free well water testing to help residents ensure the basic potability of their groundwater supply. The recommended acceptable limit of E. coli is none detectable in a 100 milliliter sample of well water. Municipal water is treated and tested to ensure it meets the Ontario drinking water standards and that it is safe to drink. The Ontario Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks monitors municipal water systems to ensure they are in compliance with Ontario Regulation 17003 drinking water systems. But private domestic wells are not regulated in this way and are also not addressed in the Ontario Clean Water Act. Private well users are responsible for well stewardship, including a variety of voluntary behaviors that contribute to the protection of rural groundwater and drinking water supplies. Regular water quality testing, water treatment, and well maintenance are considered the three primary stewardship behaviors to prevent drinking contaminated groundwater. Although these practices are not regulated, they are critical to public health. common problems requiring well maintenance may be identified during routine visual examination, including cracks or leaks in the sealed casing, drainage towards the well, a missing or damaged well cap, and overgrowth of vegetation surrounding the well. Private well users are also encouraged to regularly inspect and maintain their septic systems. Avoid paved and other hardened areas to encourage water infiltration, and to properly store and dispose of manure. Additional source water protection measures are recommended for private well users and rural community members. Following actions are encouraged to protect highly vulnerable aquifers. Proper disposal of household hazardous waste like paint, cleaners, pesticides, and medical prescriptions. Eliminate or reduce the use of pesticides, fertilizers, and road salts to prevent pollutants from entering the water system. Use of non-toxic products for cleaning and personal care products. Clean up pet waste. Take precautions when refueling gas tanks, like using absorbent materials such as sawdust to absorb any spills. And finally, conserve water. Since most aquifers in the Mississippi-Rideau region are fractured rock with thin soils, they are highly vulnerable to contamination. For this reason, private wells in eastern Ontario are characterized by an increased risk of acute gastrointestinal illness. However, with regular testing, treatment, and well maintenance, you can stay informed on the quality of your private well water and avoid consuming contaminated groundwater. We encourage you to embrace the additional source water protection measures covered here to prevent contamination of our critical groundwater resources.